You've been working on guitar solos for quite a while now, but your own solos still sound something like this. In the next few minutes, I'm gonna show you how to make your solos sound like this in a very short amount of time. Almost everyone who decides to learn lead guitar and soloing starts by learning the first position of the A minor pentatonic scale. And that's perfectly fine. However, most people quickly realize that the solos they improvise over backing tracks, or even the first composed solos they write for their own songs, somehow don't sound as cool and musical as the solos of their favorite guitar players, even though they're using the exact same scale. This didn't just happen to me when I was starting out. I still see it all the time with students who have already tried learning guitar solos on their own before taking lessons with me. Today I'm gonna show you 5 simple approaches and techniques that will instantly make your solos sound much better without having to spend months practicing speed exercises, finger exercises, and endless licks. So let's jump straight into tip number 1. Learn which notes you should be targeting. I can still clearly remember my guitar lessons with my teacher Wolfgang more than 20 years ago. Wolfgang wasn't just an amazing guitarist, he was also the best teacher I could have wished for at the time. Whenever he taught me the scale patterns I needed for soloing, he would always photocopy diagrams of those patterns and give them to me to take home. On those sheets, all the notes in a pattern were represented by black dots, while the root notes for the major and minor keys were marked differently. I honestly can't remember whether he explained this to me and I simply wasn't paying attention, or whether he assumed I already knew it, but back then I thought it was enough to know where the root notes of A minor and C major were, and that as long as I kept resolving to those notes, I couldn't really do anything wrong. I practiced my scale patterns very diligently and memorized all the locations of the notes A and C, yet somehow my solos still sounded wrong from time to time. It wasn't until I realized that I should memorize the root note of every chord I was playing over and then target that note whenever that chord was being played that my solos finally started sounding good. Here's an example. The backing track uses a very simple chord progression, A minor and G major. If I keep targeting the note A even while the G major chord is playing, my solo no longer sounds like it fits properly, even though I'm still using the correct scale. But as soon as I target G while the G major chord is being played, everything sounds right again. As a simple exercise, try playing over a backing track or a chord progression you've come up with yourself and focus on hitting the correct root note at the right moment. If you've only learned your pentatonic scale as a visual pattern so far and don't yet know the individual notes inside it, this can already be quite a challenge. The next step is to learn the thirds and fifths of the chords you're playing over. Once you do that, your solos will immediately become much more interesting. Listen to this next example. Again, I'm playing over the same backing track, but this time I target the notes A, C, and E over the A minor chord and G, B, and D over the G major chord. Can you hear how many new possibilities this opens up for creating interesting melodies? One great thing about today is that many backing track videos on YouTube display the chords on screen while they're being played. That means you can write down the notes that make up each chord in the backing track and gradually learn how to find them quickly within your scale patterns. That alone will be a complete game changer for your solos. Which brings us directly to tip number 2, learn the complete major and minor scales. Even with the G major example with its major third B, you'll notice that the pentatonic scale alone is no longer enough. If we look at all the chords in our A minor or respectively C major scale, including their triads, we'll see that every chord except A minor and C major requires either the note B or the note F. Those are exactly the notes we leave out when playing the pentatonic scale. That's why I always teach my students both the pentatonic scale and the complete major and minor scales right from the beginning. I also explain that they're really just two sides of the same coin and don't need to be treated as completely separate concepts. The pentatonic scale is especially useful for certain licks you learn later on. If you'd like to learn more about those licks, feel free to check out the video that's linked on screen right now. Learning the complete scale also encourages you to start using slightly more challenging fingerings at an early stage, particularly at this position and this position. You need to pay close attention to which fingers you're using during ascending and descending runs so that you can play smoothly and eventually build up speed as well. And if you want to learn techniques like 3 notes per string runs later on, you'll definitely have an advantage if you've mastered the complete scale in all 5 positions. Tip number 3, learn tongue twister runs. One of the best ways to make your solo sound more musical instead of simply sounding like you're running up and down a scale, even if you don't always know exactly where every note is located yet, is to learn what I call tongue twister runs. I actually noticed these fairly early in the solos of my favorite guitar players, even though I didn't have a name for them at the time. The concept is actually very simple. Instead of always playing note after note in a straight line, either ascending, descending, forwards or backwards, you can skip notes within the pentatonic scale or even within the full scale and create an effect that's somewhat comparable to reciting tongue twisters because it feels a little more challenging for your fingers to play those note combinations smoothly at first. I've prepared a simple example run through the entire pentatonic scale that should be easy for you to learn. Tip number 4, learn to use slides more creatively. Slides are a wonderful way for beginners who can't yet execute all phrasing techniques effortlessly to gradually develop their own style. First of all, try incorporating backward slides into your playing instead of only using forward slides. Backward slides create a very specific sound and are actually used less frequently by many advanced guitar players, which can help you stand out a little from other guitarists. Another important thing is understanding the rhythmic aspect of slides. You can make a slide sound like a quickly played note, or like 2 separate notes. And with the second option, you can choose whether the rhythm feels like quarter notes, eighth notes, or 16th notes. That alone allows you to make the exact same notes sound completely different in many different situations. Something that is very characteristic of my own playing style is that I often fret and play a note with either my middle or ring finger and then immediately play that same note again as a slide using my index finger. This becomes especially effective once you've learned your other scale patterns as well and are able to move horizontally across the entire fretboard. And finally, let's move on to one very special technique. Tip number 5, learn how to play rakes. Rakes are a frequently underestimated phrasing technique. I've often had to teach them even to guitar players who were already capable of playing bends and other advanced playing and phrasing techniques in order to take their playing to the next level. When playing a rake, you make a sweeping motion with your pick similar to the motion later used in sweep picking across muted strings until you arrive at your target note on a specific string. The fact that many beginners already struggle with muting unwanted string noise in general makes this technique even more challenging. At the same time, this technique teaches you a great deal about pick attack and dynamics, which benefits your note shaping in general. The muted strings need to be played very lightly because otherwise unwanted noises can still occur despite the muting. Depending on which finger you're using to fret the target note, you'll either have additional fingers available for muting, or you'll have to rely mostly on the palm of your picking hand, which makes mastering the technique even more demanding. Here are a few examples shown from 2 camera angles, one for the fretting hand and one for the picking hand, where I combine different notes with the rake technique. Once you're able to use this technique, then your simplest solos will sound as if you've been playing for a long time. And finally, here's an improvisation where I incorporate all the tips and techniques mentioned in this video. And that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any future videos. I'll see you again in the next video. Until then, bye.